Hi, my name's Sara Jade and welcome to my channel where we talk about true crime, unsolved cases and more. In this week's case we're going to be talking about Adrianne Jones and how she went missing after sneaking out of her bedroom one day. So this case takes place in 1995 in Mansfield in Texas. Around the time there was about 8,000 people living in the area and everyone knew one another. Adrianne was 16 years old and went to Mansfield High School. She was a very popular student and had lots of friends. She was also a great athlete and was on the cross-country team. Alongside this, she was a great student and was on the honour roll. When she grew up, she always wanted to be a vet. She was very close to her family and was the oldest of three and had two younger brothers. She was very close to her mum and spent a lot of time with her. However, being a typical teenager, she used to sneak out of her bedroom in the evening and go and see her friends or her boyfriend. She had just started dating a guy called Tracy in the town nearby. However, she was a good kid and didn't take any drugs or drink any alcohol or anything like that. But her parents were quite strict on her, as the town had been growing lately, and with it brought a lot more crime and a lot more gang-related activity. But they were just a normal family who went to football on Fridays, done the chores on Saturdays and went to church on Sundays. The next morning her mum was doing things around the house when she noticed that Adrianne's alarm was going off. She thought this was very weird as Adrianne usually got up and turned it off. So she decided to go in her room and ask her what was going on. When she entered her room she realised that she wasn't there. Her bed was made up and it looked like she hadn't even slept there that night. She thought that maybe she'd just gone for a run, but while looking around she found her jogging gear. A few moments later one of her friends knocked at the door and was ready to take her to school. At this she got very worried and decided to call round and see if anyone had seen her. She tried the school and also the restaurant she worked at, just in case she had gone there. When no one had heard from her she decided to call the police and report her as missing. In a town nearby called Grand Prairie, around 7 o'clock a local man was just driving his van to post some letters in the mailbox. When he was driving down the street, he noticed one of his fences were over and he decided to pull over to have a look. He was a bit worried at first as there had been some gang-related activity in the area. However, when he got closer, he realised someone was laying on the floor. As he approached the body, he realised that it was a young girl laying there on her back. She had a long-sleeve flannel t-shirt on and shorts. She had no shoes on and just socks and looked like she'd just got out of bed. When looking at her, she had scrapes on her face and her leg was caught up in the fence. On close inspection, he had realised that she had died. Half her head had been caved in and she had had 2 gunshot wounds to her face. One had gone through her cheek and one had gone right between her eyes, and it looked like a gang-related killing. He decided to call the police, and when they turned up, they thought that maybe it was one of the gangs in the local areas, either from Dallas or Fort Worth. When examining the body, they realised that she put up quite a defence and was clinging onto the grass. This proved that she had been shot just where she was laying. The body was taken in for an autopsy, and they reported that there was a blunt force trauma to her head, like she'd been attacked by a hammer. She also had loads of defensive wounds all over her body, and she'd put up a brave fight, and also looked like she'd been tried to be strangled. However, the fatal shots were the 2 shots to her face, which were through her cheek and between her eyes. They put a description together of the body and sent this round to all the areas to see if anyone reported a missing person. Around 12 p.m, the Mansfield police responded to the call and identified the body as Adrianne Jones. They had the awful job of telling her parents of what had happened. They were devastated and just fell apart.
I mean, here she is, this beautiful young girl, and she's found in this really wackety place out in nowhere land, and she's been shot in the face and bludgeoned in the back of her head, and you don't know why. What did this young 16-year-old little girl know or do that caused you to hate her that much?
The news started to spread around the small town, and the school stopped their classes so that everyone could grieve together. No one could quite believe that anyone would do this to Adrianne and that she would be involved in drugs, and they started to believe that there was a killer roaming around their town. This put the pressure on the police, and they brought her parents in to get the events of what happened on that night. Her mum said it was just an average evening that night. They had gone out for dinner, had come home, and Adrianne had done her homework. She then got special permission to give her boyfriend a call as he had been out of town. She also mentioned that when she was on the phone, she got a call from David from the cross-country team. They couldn't understand who would have done this to her and didn't think she had any enemies. They decided to speak to David and get his side of the story. David Graham was 17 years old and also went to Mansfield High School. He was described as an all-American boy who was in the Civil Air Patrol. He was well respected and had lots of friends at the school. When they brought him in for questioning, he said that he hadn't spoken to Adrianne that night. He'd said he'd been at his girlfriend's house just studying for their exams. He knew Adrianne, but they weren't very good friends. They just knew each other from the cross-country team.
We were just casual acquaintances. saw each other after school, called each other, or anything like that.
They then decided to go and speak to her boyfriend Tracy. They had corroborated his alibi, so they knew he wasn't involved in the case. He said the same thing. They spoke to each other on the phone and someone had called in around 10:45. However, he said that it wasn't David that called in, it was a guy called Brian. They started to think that maybe Adrianne had lied to her mum, and really she was on the phone to Brian and not David. Tracy then went on to say that Brian McMillan had grown a very fond interest of Adrianne. He used to follow her around and just turn up at her house. Adrianne didn't mind talking to him, but she thought it was a bit stalkerish. Things got worse when he used to turn up at her work and make advances towards her, and this made her very uncomfortable. At this news, they decided to bring Brian in for questioning and see him as a suspect in the case. Brian's parents bring him down to the station to answer some questions. At first he denies knowing Adrianne, but soon he opens up and says they did know each other. He'd been suffering from bipolar and anxiety issues and also had a drinking problem. He said that his memory was quite foggy and he didn't remember much. He also mentioned that Adrianne was hit over the head with a hammer, and they also thought this was very strange as this information hadn't been released to the public yet. They asked his parents if he can take a lie detector test, but his father refuses to let them have one. Based on the inconsistencies of his questions and the fact that his father wouldn't let him take a test, they decide to arrest him for her murder. They use a tactical team to do a dynamic entry into his house to arrest him. At this, the news spreads across the town. A lot of people knew him in the town and couldn't quite believe that he'd be responsible for this. He spent the Christmas period in jail, and finally after 3 weeks his father folded and allowed him to take the test. He passed the polygraph and the district attorney decided to drop all charges against him. In May 1996, Diane Zamora had joined the Naval Academy. A few months into her stay, her and her friends had been missing home. They were sitting around talking about stories about their hometowns, and Diana wanted to fit in, so she told them a story that no one could quite believe. Diane Zamora was born on the 21st of January in 1976. She had first attended the United States Air Force in Colorado Springs before joining the Naval Academy. She'd always wanted to be an astronaut when she grew up, so she thought these were the perfect steps to take. She had met her boyfriend at the age of 14 and they started dating a few months later. She started to tell her friends all about her life back in Texas and how she'd met her high school sweetheart, David Graham. She learned about the Civil Air Patrol in school and thought it'd be a great step up to be an astronaut, and this is where she met her boyfriend David. David had always wanted to be a pilot and he saw the Air Force as a stepping stone up in his career. He was a great officer and just what the military were looking for. At school he was often referred to as Colonel Graham, as he'd walk around with his buzz cut and his military bearing. He was winning awards left, right and centre and was up for the prestigious awards of the Spatz Award. They were both ambitious and very like-minded and saw each other as their soulmates. Diane had said keeping her virginity was very important to her, but when she had met David and they started going out, she thought that he was the man for her, and they decided after school they would get married, so she was quite happy to lose her virginity to him. David, however, wasn't as committed, and according to him, in November of 1995, him and Adrianne started to hook up. He'd said that they'd meet up in private and didn't tell any of their friends. One day after the school meet, he was driving her home when they pulled up behind the school and had sex in the car. He told his friends all about it, but was now feeling guilty and wanted to tell his girlfriend. It was a Friday night and David was quite upset with Diana, as she didn't want to study for her SATs the next day. They got into a huge argument, and when he was leaving and packing up his stuff, she wasn't paying any attention to him, so he turned round and said he'd been unfaithful. She started going mad and told him to tell her exactly what happened, and after telling her that he'd slept with Adrianne, she went absolutely mental and started banging her head against the floor and screaming, "I wish you were both dead. I want to get rid of you both. I hate you both." And he just wanted to do anything he could to make her happy again.
I knew that the relationship we had was too serious for that time in our life, and I tried to slow it down, but there was nothing I could do. I was infatuated with her and she was obsessed with me.
When she was talking to her air cadet friends, she said that her boyfriend really loved her and would do anything for her. He would even kill for her. They thought this was very strange and reported this information. The Air Academy then decided to call the police, and they remembered that David had been on Adrianne's cross-country team and decided to call him in for more questioning. They wanted to get David's side of the story, and at first he would deny everything and said it never happened. However, the Air Force had said he needed to take a lie detector test, and when he failed the test, he decided to give them a confession. He wrote a 4-page confession about everything that had happened that night and said they needed to kill Adrianne to make their love right between them again. He described how Diana was very jealous and very possessive, and he would do anything to calm her down and make her happy again. She said the only thing that would make them both happy again was if he got rid of the one thing that came between their love, and was to kill Adrianne. Although he was quite taken back about this, he wanted to do anything he could to make her feel better again, and decided to go along with the plan. They bring in Diane for questioning and tell her all about how David had admitted to the murder and said that Diane had been involved. They then go on to show her David's confession, and she decides to give them her side of the story. She said after David had told her all about the affair, they had decided they need to kill Adrianne. They decided that David would give Adrianne a call and just ask her to come out and speak to him. He said that he was very upset and just wanted to have a chat with one of his friends. They had agreed to meet up a few hours after her parents had gone to sleep. Once she was in the car and they were driving along, he pulled over and then nodded for Diana to get out the back of the car. She came round and started shouting at Adrianne and said, "Did you sleep with David? Tell me the truth. What had happened?" And Adrianne turned round and said, "Yes, I'm so sorry. It was never meant to happen, and I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed." At this, Diana just freaked out and started smacking her across the head with one of the weights that was in the car. They had originally decided to try and strangle her and dump her in the lake and float her body down to the bottom of the lake with one of the weights. David started to grab her in the car and was trying to strangle her. However, she was able to fight both of them off and get out of the car. When she was running along, David grabbed his gun and started following her. He then shot her on the side of the face, and when she fell over, they both walked over and he shot her right between the eyes. They then turned to each other and said, "I love you." And then Diana said, "Oh, we should have done that." They then went back home and acted as if nothing had happened.
Once word gets out, Diane and David are arrested and charged with the murder of Adrianne Jones and flown back to Texas to stand trial.
The case then went to trial and they both recanted their stories and started to turn on one another. David said that he wasn't even there that night and he was just helping Diana cover up the murder. He said that she had come to him after it had happened and just asked him to help her. She, on the other hand, had said that David had done it all and she was there but never touched her. In Diana's trial, she claimed that she was there but she never took part in the killing. She said that she'd been pressured by an over-controlling boyfriend who told her to come along.
He said, look what you made me do.
Did you make him do that, Diane?
No. I asked him to let me meet her.
Had you ever asked him to kill Adrianne Jones for you?
No.
However, she believed that David was very into guns and just wanted to kill somebody. She was very scared for her life and just went along with anything he did. However, her written statement contradicted this, and they also brought in a couple of witnesses who confirmed that Diane had spoken about how Adrianne had deserved it and that she wanted her dead.
She said this is a girl he had sex with and that they had planned her murder.
She said that everyone knew that the girl was a tramp and a slut and that she deserved to die.
In David's trial, he said that he wasn't even there. Diane had lost it and gone there and killed her and just told him about it after she had done it. He said the only thing he was guilty of was covering up the crime. He then went on to tell the police that the gun was in his attic. He'd said that Diane had wanted to keep it as a trophy of what she would do for him.
I don't know if she was attached to it. She thought it was some kind of sign of her devotion to me, if it was just some kind of symbol of what she would do. I don't know, but she wouldn't let me get rid of it.
It was also then brought up in court how Brian and Adrianne never actually slept together. A couple of her friends confirmed that she hadn't been with him, and on that night he'd told Diana they'd slept together. She'd actually gone home with one of her friends. After the court hearing, David then confessed that they hadn't slept together and they were just friends and they only knew each other through the cross-country team. They were both tried separately and Diana went first and was found guilty of murder. David then went to trial and Diana was called as witness, but she pleaded the fifth. And after 8 hours of deliberation, they finally convicted David of murder as well.
We, the jury, find the defendant David Christopher Graham guilty of the offense of capital murder as alleged in the indictment.
Based on their confessions, they were both found guilty of capital murder. However, her parents took the death penalty off the table as they didn't want to see 2 other children killed as well. They were both then given life in prison and were eligible for parole in 2036. Although David has taken to prison and spends his time exercising or going to church, it hasn't been the same for Diana. She has had a difficult time in prison and hasn't made any friends. She keeps a wall around herself and just keeps to herself. In 2002, David then changed his story again. He said that he did kill Adrianne, but he'd done it to show his devotion to his girlfriend. In 2005, Diana tried to get another trial. However, the judge said there was no more evidence in the case and it was dismissed. So that's the end of the case. This is a tragic case where Adrianne lost her life due to some man trying to get back at his girlfriend. Let me know your comments and thoughts below. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.
You call me a saint, but you know I'm a stranger.